Training has to have a very defined objective, trying to tell what it is all about. There are 4 factors that we are going to learn today. The first one is called as reaction, next is called learning, then we talk about behavior and results. On-job training actually puts the employee in a more active role rather than off the job. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Unit 3, 4th semester BBA Human Resource Management, where we're going to talk about training and development. Training and development is the most important part of the HR process. Why? Because that tries to understand where an employee is lacking and what do we need to take him further. Now, whenever we talk about training need analysis, this is a systematic process through which we identify the gap between the current and desired performance or the skills that are needed. Now, in an organization, when you talk about the skill set, that needs to keep on increasing, that needs to keep on the practicing levels. We need to start improving ourselves. We cannot be satisfied with the factor that yes, we have learned something, so we can keep moving with that. And that would not be a right answer. So what we need to do is that we need to bring in the training module and we need to start seeing that the employees get trained on a regular basis, their skills are sharpened, and the performance level keeps moving according to the organization needs. Now, according to Francis and Ronald B's 14-wheel model, which is quite common among the training factor, this provides a framework where we typically try to conduct several stages leading to selection of appropriate training model. Now, whenever we talk about these methods, we have to identify first a method that is correct for the organization, that is good enough for the company to adopt. Now, we cannot replicate models from other company, or we cannot say that one training methodology is the best for all. It depends from organization to organization, and it needs to understand whether it's a service-based or it is a product-based, what kind of organizations are we looking at. Now, as we move further, the training needs can be categorized based on which level they are identified. Now, for example, organization needs to be focused on strategy, on the climate of the company. They need to address the large-scale issues like preparing of new technology, improving of company culture, addressing the skill or gap, and all those factors of the workforce. So somewhere down the lane, people would start asking this question to you: how things are moving, where is that the cultural gap is going to be analyzed effectively. Now, one time when you start looking into the organizational needs, you will start understanding that there is a necessity for people to understand how the issues are developing, how things are going further, and how do we need to start bridging the gap and taking it forward. Now, there are some times where you might feel that I've tried to improve, but then I need to address certain specific issues so that the skill set can be better. We need to bring in a new set of technology, new approach altogether so that we can improve the standards here. So whenever we talk about this organizational factor needs, we need to understand the large-scale issues first rather than just looking into a particular methodology. Now, most of the workforce also understand that the company would spend quite an amount of time and energy in training them, and this training is mandatory. Why? Because we need to catch up to the standards of the market. Now, followed by which the occupational group needs, when we start identifying the gaps requirement between the job roles, departments and teams. Now, let's take a very simple example of a sales team that's been given here. The communication training itself can be one of the best soft skills training that we are talking about for the sales team. Why? Because they might be having a strong product, but then people might be lacking in communication. Their presentation skills might not be up to the mark. So that can be taken as an exercise to do things better. Now, sometimes we start finding that these things in the modern world are being upgraded with the help of technology. So you don't have to worry about the the factors that are coming in. So you can bring in an AI methodology, you can bring in a new CRM, you can bring in a new platform-based software which can start working together in order to make the sales happen even more efficiently. So what happens here is that the production team, the product team, or for example, it's the sales team, they understand what needs to be picked up and how they need to speak in terms of the presentation area. Now, similarly, when we are talking about individual needs specific to a particular, focusing on enhancing their current performance, preparing them for the future roles, or addressing a performance gap that needs to be identified. Now, this is very, very important. Why? Because individually, when the organization starts scanning, it tries to understand that there are certain specific people who need a kind of coaching, a kind of help that can help them to improve their performance. So in that sector, in that performance area, I would like to take up these kind of activities and make their enhancement even more better. So definitely we have an approach, we have a centric ideology of understanding how to make things better for them. So let's start focusing on that individual needs and that individual performance. Followed by which, the 14-wheel model, as we have been talking about, this tries to answer certain specific questions. The one which we are talking about is identify the real need and the clear objectives. Sometimes we do training because we find it as a regular exercise. We just believe that, yes, people have to get trained. So let's do some training. Let's show it in the book of accounts. Let's show it in the HR capital saying that, yes, we have also trained our employees. But the reality is not that. Why? Because if the real need for training is not identified, any training cannot be a replacement, or any training cannot be compromised altogether. So sometimes you might start feeling that I'm just training for the need of it, just for the namesake of it, which does not really fit in the bill. The second thing is that the objective of training has to be measurable. So once a person has undergone a training, that means that person should be able to give out some output, some measurable output. That's very important here. So which means to say that output needs to be done in such a way that the company is able to focus, the company is able to see what's happening, the company is able to believe on the factors that's going through and then take it forward altogether. So that means to say that training has to have a very, very defined objective, trying to tell what it is all about. Now, when you start moving further, you also identified optimum training methods. Then you calculate the cost, evaluate the training, and provide a feedback. So you can see the connection one after the another which starts coming inside. The first thing is that once you have identified optimum training, which means the most effective way of training a person. It is not just that person goes in and gets trained for 80 hours or 20 hours or 100 hours a year. Now, that is not the objective, the most effective way. Even if the training was for one day, but the training needs to be in such a way that it creates some impact towards the job. Some positive impact should be there. You calculate the cost. When I say calculating the cost, the trainer cost, the venue cost, the materials, and the presentations, all those factors will come into it. So you need to calculate the cost and ensure that you don't overrun the budget too much. Followed by which, evaluate the training. What are you doing in the training? What is the purpose at which you are trying to make this training even more effective? That means to say that let's start working towards that factors of training through which you can make the activity even more stronger. So that is very, very important for us. Now we need to focus on those factors very, very clearly. Now, next thing is that provide the feedback. You need to see that the feedback that is given out of the training is not just where you keep ticking the checkbox, but rather you start understanding how the training has been for so many years, how the training has been going on in terms of understanding the entire cycle. So one has to see that there has been an interconnection, there has been a step-by-step evaluation of this training program. which has made them, the employees, the participants, as well as the management, find this entire exercise quite fruitful. Now, similarly, when you start going about training methods, we're going to talk about two important things called the on the job and off the job. Now, what is on the job training altogether? Which means to say, when an employee is already performing, is working in the organization, what is the effective method to find out their involvement? Sometimes we say this, that we need people who can work it out, who can start performing, who can start doing it. And that's where you would be able to understand this entire performance, entire activity here. Now, on the job is something where you put the employee to the actual testing mode. The exact way of understanding the employee, how things can move further, how things can be made even more positive, even more better for that person, how it can start working together in terms of the activity. And that's where it starts coming in. That's where, the on-the-job training tells you very, very sincerely, or rather very, very clearly about this factor, that on the job is more about understanding the future dynamics, because when you're working there and when you're being put onto a training, the measurement is going to be on a live basis, which means to say that whatever you perform will be immediately calculated, will be immediately benchmarked and found what exactly has happened. So this is why this matters a lot in terms of the aspects. Followed by which, once you have seen this on-job training, you would also appreciate this, that on-job training actually puts the employee in a more active role rather than off the job. Why? Because on the job is something that goes on with your regular work, so you don't feel the stress. You don't feel that you have to take an extra initiative of staying back and learning and doing something. Rather, it is something which is already pitched in, which means it's blended well with the work atmosphere. So you would be doing it, you would be building that system altogether. So on the job is a very, very effective way. Followed by which, the on the job will also start seeing that in their actual work environment. So which means to say that they're not going to get moving away, no deterioration at all in terms of the work factor. Now, what are the methods? First one is coaching and mentoring. Next is job instruction, job rotation, apprentice. All these things are supposed to be something which is coming in the on the job. Now, coaching and mentoring is where typically when you start looking into services oriented company, we have people called as mentors who guide people on how to do the job. So you have an experienced person who has already worked in that role. So let's say a fresher comes and joins in, or somebody from another department gets transferred. You assign a mentor. The mentor takes the responsibility of guiding the employee, making him understand how effectively the job needs to be performed, what are the changes that he needs to adapt, and how he needs to take it further. Now, followed by the job instruction training, where there's a sequence, there's a preparation, there's a set of activities that has to be done in a serial order. So that's why we call it as a very, very important aspect or methodology altogether. So this is quite interesting for all of us to understand, to take it forward, and rather believe within ourselves that this is how things have been moving. So whenever we talk about this methodology this is quite interesting for all of us to understand. And on the top of it, I would always say that this gives us an opportunity to learn something better. Now, in the job instruction, there's a well-structured plan, so you have to follow the sequence as mentioned. Job rotation, where a person from sales is being given an opportunity to work in HR, HR moves to finance, finance moves to marketing. Now you give a rotation to the employee to understand the various verticals of the organization. So that would be a very good exercise for the employees to learn about the various departments. Followed by apprenticeship, Starting from short term to long term, you have apprenticeship, which makes the people understand how exactly the role is. So whenever you're taken in as a trainee or an apprentice, you will need to understand to learn the work first. They will tell you what kind of work, how you need to do it, what is the accomplishment rate. So this gives you an actual picture about how the work actually proceeds. Followed by which off-the-job training. This is another methodology where we start setting into often a work setting kind of environment, a classroom, a conference hall, or an online. These days, online training has become very, very popular. So people try to take online methodology, which actually helps them to learn faster at your own pace wherever you are located. Now let's try to understand what is off the job. There are some times where people feel that you need to be taken a day off. You need to move out of the environment. You need to go to a place where you can sit and spend your entire time only on learning. So which means to say that you can't have the regular environment. You need to go outside the environment. You need to sit, you need to understand, you need to talk, discuss, come out with a team event, and then understand the functionality here. So often I say that this is very, very important for each one of them. This is highly important. Why? Because we need to understand the variations. We need to understand how it works. What are all the theoretical knowledge behind it? So sometimes the most dry thing, I would always say that lectures are quite boring, but then when you start talking about workshops, you get a lot of interaction, you get some activities to do, you have some peer learning there. So definitely workshops are considered to be very, very good. Similarly, when you talk about the stimulations or vestibule trainings, we use equipment, we use a stimulator models where the employees have to get inside, they have to start working, they have to start adapting to the environment, they have to see what are all the risks that is involved, where it is involved, what kind of activities have been done. So all those things will also matter a lot. Followed by case studies. Case studies are the real world business problems which develop that critical thinking, decision making skills. So they are very much needed. A case study will actually tell you how exactly things are moving, what is the necessity behind it, how things can be changed, what are all the factors inside it. So all those things comes from the case study aspect. Now, let's also talk about the computer-based learning, the flexible online courses or the modules that are available, which will make the employee learn at his own pace, at his own levels, so that he can take it forward and develop by himself. Training evaluation, the final stage in the standard approach is the evaluation, although evaluation typically takes time in terms of deciding, but then this is a very, very crucial stage which will make the employee understand what has been going on, why it has been going on, what are all the factors, and how you should normally get into it. So evaluation criteria should be built on training programs from the outset so that you are able to understand and you are able to take it forward thoroughly. Evaluation is a step-by-step process, so one should not just rush up and just finish it. Rather, they should see that each and every stage is taken into consideration, the performance of the candidate, how has been the training module, what we need to do and how we need to analyze. Everything becomes a part of the training evaluation. Now, the first thing among training evaluation, there are 4 factors that we are going to learn today. The first one is called as reaction. Next is called learning. Then we talk about behavior and results. One of the great things that Kirkpatrick in the year 1979 model, which has been head of the instructional design, he always says that some or the other tested form of learning is a very, very common factor that needs to be used so that you will be able to understand how the outcome is being realized. So the outcome is normally checked into these 4 factors: reactions, learning, behavior, and the result factor. So let us go one by one. So first, let's start with the reactions. What do you mean by reaction? Reactions are normally the usual captured attention using attitude of questionnaires, surveys administered at the end of the course. Once a training is completed, they give you a questionnaire. They tell you to give them the feedback. what was good, what was bad, and whether you were able to understand every part of training. Was the training effective enough? Did you do the training properly? Was the methodology conducive enough to learn? How was it going? Where things were moving? All those parts matter a lot here. So which means to say, as a member of the training criteria or the training sector altogether, there is a lot of things that one has to understand. Now, the program that is being given to you doesn't mean that it's just an end, it just got over kind of thing, but rather it is a subjective methodology. So one has to understand whether the training behavior performance levels have gone up, any changes have come, can we improve it, did the candidate like it? So there are so many questions that needs to be understood and then answered. Reaction is not just a spontaneous overthrow of what you're talking, but reaction is more about understanding the situation and then marking up the answer. So one has to know what exactly is marking, why they are marking it, and how that doesn't matter altogether. Now, let's go here and try to understand the learning factor. Now, that means the absorption of knowledge and content, evaluation at a pre-test and post-test level, and formal assessments, qualification exams, which means what have you learned from the training. So after the training is over, now I'm going to measure on the knowledge content. Why? Because end of the training, something has to go inside your head, which means to say you have learned something new, you have to get some new knowledge, you should have acquired some skills. So that's why this becomes very important. So we are directly attributing the knowledge factor of the training towards the growth factor, towards the end of the training. Now, if there is no knowledge factor reaction, nothing has changed, nothing has gone ahead, that means we will not be able to give any kind of appreciation here. So that's why I always say that formal assessment are more based on knowledge factor. If the knowledge assessment is done properly, then automatically you can measure the achievements. The level 3 is behavior, which means to say that it refers to the successful application of learning. That is the transition in from the classroom to that of the workplace. So whatever you have learned in the classroom has to be translated in the workplace. So whenever you're going through some assessment, some sort of observation, you should see that when it is conducted by a formal authority, there is some change. There is some kind of behavioral aspect. You're able to think better, you're able to apply your ideas better, you're able to communicate better, you're able to present yourself better, you're able to understand the work environment better. So behavioral transformation is a very important aspect of training because it measures the direct output. Now, followed by which the level 4 that comes into learning aspect, which means to say that there would be a link between the job and the impact on the organization. If the training has been well designed and it has met its objectives in terms of the individual performance, there should be some feed through in terms of the enhanced business performance. Yes, it has given. And at this level, the training can start to be evaluated in terms of return on investment. So this is very, very important. Why? Because whenever we are talking about the investment, it has to go through a series of phases, which means there should be some return on investment after putting in so much of time, money, and energy into it. You need to understand that there has been some growth, there has been some change, some good aspects that are taken over. So we need to understand whether we are doing it on the right path, whether we are taking it on the right stands altogether. So this is definitely considered to be one of the best aspects in terms of growth, in terms of working activity altogether. So at the end of the day, what is the learning level, what is the outcome that you have performed will definitely matter in terms of your training. With this, I come to the end of today's class and session. I hope and believe that all the facts and figures that we have spoken will be of great help to you, both in terms of theory as well as in the practical walk of life. In the upcoming session, we would be talking about succession planning, more about the training factors and how it helps the HR to build the organizations better. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed. You have a great day ahead. Thank you once again for joining me on this wonderful session.